Hi, everyone. Yep, we are live now. Hi, everyone, and welcome to The Writer's Edge. I'm your host, Salidas, and tonight we're going to be talking to author interviewers, book reviewers. Some people have radio shows, some people have podcasts, and some are more familiar with publishing, and some are authors. So before we get into our introductions tonight, let me just tell you that this episode has been kindly sponsored by Creative Edge. So let me just tell you a little bit about them. Creative Edge specializes in elevating the public profile of both traditional and indie authors and artists in a few different ways. They do book signings, media interviews in all forms, which includes radio, print, television, and they set up events, and that includes presentations, school and library visits, conferences like book conventions and festivals. They also obtain book reviews and interviews through bloggers and podcasters like who we have on today. And they also have collaborations with a number of media and literary organizations, and that includes Alexandria Writers Center Society and When Words Collide Festival. So thank you again so much to Creative Edge for sponsoring this video. I'm really excited with who we have here tonight. And even though, as you know, we have some set questions, please leave your questions as always in the chat, and I will do my best to get them answered. And as always, if we don't have time, I will leave them in the comments section down below afterwards for our panelists to answer. So don't forget to subscribe to our channel, hit that notification bell so you can see when we go live and post a new video. And now let's get right into it. First, we're going to ask each person to introduce themselves. So I'll introduce myself after that. So I'm going to go from one side to the other. Well, we just lost one of our people, but they will be back, I'm sure. So let's get started with Katie.
Oh, throwing me under the bus first. All right.
Throwing you in there.
I'm Katie Salidas. I'm an author, and I'm also one of the hosts of Spilling Ink. We are a web show on YouTube that interviews anyone in the publishing industry. So authors, editors, publicists, you name it. We look behind the book to see what goes into creating the books that you guys love.
Thank you so much for being with us, Katie. And you definitely need to check out Spilling Ink. It is really a great podcast. Okay, so let's go with Tim next.
So I'm Tim Niederriter. I'm also an author, and I run a podcast. I actually run a couple podcasts, but the one that's relevant to this show is Alive After Reading, which is where I just talk with other authors, and we have pretty casual conversation about every week, and that's over at my website and all over the web, of course.
Great, thanks for being here. And next we have Jim.
Hi, I'm Jim Christina. I'm a writer, and I also have a weekly radio program called The Writer's Block on LA Talk Radio. And we also have a little publishing company called Black Dog Publishing, and our DBA is Tuscany Bay Books.
Great, awesome to have you. And we also have Ellen.
Hi everyone, my name is Ellen. I run Scribbles, Quibbles, and Scrawlings, or SQS Reviews, which is a book review blog. I also do author interviews, and I'll do writing tips posts that are all contributed to by a number of authors. And I am also an editor by trade.
Great. And we do also have David Ellis, who some of you are familiar with. He just dropped out. I'm sure it's an internet connection problem, but just briefly, he does the blog Too Full to Write, where he interviews a ton of different kinds of creative minds, including authors, photographers, movie makers, all kinds of people. And he is an award-winning poet. I'm sure he will tell us more about us himself when he gets back on here. But in the meantime, if you do want to check him out, of course, everyone's links are down below in the description box. So for now, let's hop right into the questions that we have set. And as I said before, leave any questions you have in the chat for us. So let's just get started with a general question that I'd love for all of you to answer. And that is, what is your ideal book or author like? Since most of us either publish or we review or whatever we do, interview, what is your ideal book or author like?
Well, any particular one you want to start with?
Anyone at all.
Okay, go for it, Ellen.
Thank you. For me, I love it when authors kind of break the mold and they'll either go cross genre or they'll be really experimental with what they're working with. As much as I love the traditional genres, I work with speculative fiction. So I love that cross genre when you can mix crime with fantasy or supernatural, things like that really, really jump out at me.
That's great. I have to agree with that. I love genre mixing. It's such you can find such unusual mixes, and it can really change the whole game when you're reading something. You can just even read it for that.
Absolutely. It really makes an author stand out against the crowd in their genre if they're able to play with it a little bit.
For me, on Spilling Ink at least, I like to interview authors that are willing to reveal all their secrets. You know, the show is all about going behind the book, finding out how the books were created, and that goes for indie, it goes for traditional, whatever method that author has gone through to get their book published. How did they get there? And since there's so many ways around, learning all those secrets is kind of it's a new story each time for us.
Yeah, I like an author who can talk at length about themselves, especially for my show specifically, but I really enjoy speculative fiction authors as well. I think, and I mean, as a genre blender myself, I think I enjoy that more as well. So I'll agree with Ellen and Chris, about that. So that's good.
Well, we speak to a lot of different authors, and although I stick with a pretty much the same genre. Weekly, we speak with authors that do cross genres, and I do like authors much like Tim that like to talk about themselves. I like it when they talk about their books, but that can take up a whole hour or more, and our time is constrained, so we have to get into, like Katie, we get into their process and the story behind the book. And that takes a little time too. So, I mean, we kind of try to steer them away from talking about too much about the book. Not only one, because they like to give away little flashpoints, and then there goes the book. So that's what we like to do.
Yeah, I think we tend to focus a lot less on the actual book itself and more about the process.
Right.
Yeah, and that's super helpful for all authors, even if they're advanced authors. Sometimes you just hear something different, and it can make such a huge difference to your own writing. I know I've been writing since I was a kid, and I still hear all kinds of advice that will just suddenly hit me in the right way, and it can change a lot for me.
Well, it's really wonderful when they can come in and throw out a little tidbit of information that nobody's ever heard. That's just their secret. And like Katie, we like their secrets because their secrets can benefit a lot more than just themselves.
Absolutely.
But what I don't like is when they spend the entire time trying to shut them up on the show. Not you, Katie.
So what would you say then is your biggest pet peeve? It could be in trying to interview an author, or it could be in a book. It could be both, whatever you guys, depending on what you usually do. If you're an interviewer or reviewer, it's going to be different, of course. But what is your biggest pet peeve, would you say?
Wow. I think my biggest pet peeve, especially when we're hosting our show, is when we can't get the author to stop talking about his book. We understand the fact that they really like to talk about their work, but they also are there for a separate reason. And it's really hard sometimes to steer them away from that book. Now, as far as pet peeves in a book goes, I really don't have any, because that's not my work. That's their work.
Yeah, I'll agree that I generally don't have as much fun on the show. I don't enjoy that as much, and I don't think it's as valuable when the guest talks just at length about the particulars of their book or their world or whatever. Even though I will enjoy the world talk a lot, because that's the kind of person I am. When I'm reading a book, if the ending has a very different tone from the rest of the story, a sudden twist that changes it, and sometimes that can work, but a lot of the time it doesn't, and that's kind of a pet peeve for me.
I seem to have the opposite problem of you guys, because I've had a few interviews, especially within the last year, where the author would be giving me one-word answers, and that was driving me crazy. And I didn't end up posting these interviews because there was just no content there. I was asking them questions that should have led to multi-sentence, if not longer, answers. And they were giving me yes, no, I guess so, and that's it. And I'm not going to post that because that's not the kind of content that my readers want or the content that my readers expect. So the author should be able to talk at length. And that might not necessarily be always the way that you want it to be on your podcast or whatever. If it's a limited time, they should be able to condense it if need be. But they should be giving you more than a yes or a no.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah. If you can get a conversation going, that usually helps. I know a lot of times it's nerves. If people aren't used to answering interview style questions or being live or being on a show just in general, then they tend to clam up a little bit and they give you the one-word answers. But if you can get that conversation going and just turn it into a back and forth rather than, question, answer, they do tend to warm up a little. We've had a few guests who have started off with that very timid, very shy, but by the end of it, we're having just a, conversation over coffee type situation.
Absolutely, and that's ideal. But in my case, I tend to meet with the author either in person or over the internet, and I'll record the audio and transcribe it. And everything on my blog is posted in text, so anything can be edited if they didn't give me the exact answer in the right way, and there was not that pressure of being live. But still, I don't know, maybe I'm just interviewing the wrong authors, but I've gotten a few that would just give me one-word answers without those pressures, which was really unfortunate.
I've had a few like that, and actually that probably does take the cake for me as far as being a problem. I think I've interviewed one person who was like that. So that's why I didn't put it on my list. But
we had a gentleman on our show, 2 years ago or so. He wrote a series of just tremendous books. They were just outstanding. They were almost like steampunk. They were steampunk type Western books, and they were really, really good, talking about cross genre. And he got on the show, and all he talked about was his dead wife.
Oh no!
And it was like, holy crap! How do we quiet this guy down? At least get him on subject, get him back on point. And his wife had been gone for like a year and a half, but that's all he could talk about, and it was sad.
That's a difficult conversation to save, and that's a tough one
to be
listening to and watching, and how even showing compassion is you can do that, certainly, of course, but then what when they keep going?
Right, exactly. But we have had authors that have written tremendous books, and I mean world-class, New York Times best-selling books, and the authors have been like talking to a board, as Ellen said. We get one-word answers, and they're just like really boring. The guy writes a terrific book, and live he's just like, wow, he's boring. So I mean, you pays your money, you takes your chances.
Yeah, and some people are just much better with the written word where they can edit and take their time and work it out than they are necessarily in person. But I think you guys gave some really good advice as to, how to have a good interview there, and warming people up, and, trying to think of it as, instead of just, this is an interview, having it be really just like, Katie said, it's a conversation. It's a nice, comfortable conversation.
Right.
Yeah. We do have an audience question. This is from Antonio. Thank you for that, Antonio. He says, what is your preferred type of author in social media? Not only interviews, but their presence.
For me, go ahead.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'll read it one more time. He says, what is your preferred type of author in social media? Not just interviews, but their social media presence.
Okay, I'll jump in here. For me, I don't really care how many followers they have. I think that's what the question is asking. Obviously, if they have more followers and share the content that I'm posting about them, that's great. That's fantastic. I get more readers out of it. Everyone wins in that situation. But for me, I cover a lot of indie authors, a lot of self-published authors, a lot of authors that publish with small presses. As kind of a general rule, I don't really cover anyone who has been published by the big five because they don't really need the marketing help. So in my mind, I'm there to help them gain that presence. I'm there to help them put their book out there. And I'm going to do the best I can with that, regardless of how many followers they have.
Yeah, social media, I don't really deal with a whole lot. I just tried to stay out of that world. Yeah, I have to have some presence, and we do have a Facebook page for our radio show. But especially if you follow writers on social media, some of them tend to get really windy, and it's like I don't care to hear it anymore, and I just don't log on. So I just kind of stay off the whole genre.
I think
Yeah,
ideally,
Katie, you're great.
Oh, sorry.
No, you go ahead.
Okay, sorry. I think ideally having somebody who is internet savvy is good because yes, they can share with their audience, but also for shows like mine where we go into the behind the book kind of things, we learn about all aspects of the book process, including marketing. They can sometimes bring little nuggets of wisdom to the table too, and give our audience more insight on how to use social media.
Yeah. So I don't really, I think I'm with Ellen on, I don't really care how big their presence is on social media. Though right now my show is still pretty young and pretty small. So it would be helpful to me to have larger guests. It doesn't really affect it in my choice of who I have on this show at this point.
Yeah, I have to say, for the Writer's Edge, I try to get a good mix of people in there. If I'm talking to authors, I do try to get some traditionally published, some indie. It depends on what we're talking about also. But if you have a mix, then you're more likely to bring more types of people, more people who are interested in, of course, the author themselves, but in general, some people are more interested in those they've heard of, and some are interested in those they haven't. And so if you draw them all together, then we can sort of all share those readers and that audience. So I do like to try to get also such different perspectives that way. So for me, I'm looking for sort of both a lot of followers and traditional, and smaller followers and indie, or vice versa. It can cross over. Sometimes traditionally published authors actually have a pretty small social media following.
Yeah, the skill set between indie and traditional is surprisingly different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very true.
I try to do on my platform just do exactly the same as you, Christy, in terms of having indie and self-published and traditional published people, because I get a lot of people that are saying to me that I should really only focus on people with big social media followings, or people are traditionally published, and I just think, well, that's very unfair to the people that are self-published, because a lot of them could have very good reviews, or just not had the exposure that requires them to have lots of followers on some social media platforms. So I don't tend to discriminate in that particular respect. I like to try and leave the bar very much kind of sort of open for anyone, so they don't have to only be like one particular type, as you said, because if otherwise you're excluding a whole lot of people that have probably spent a lot of time and money and effort on editing and covers and things through their self-publishing. A lot of traditionally published authors.
Absolutely. And you have to start somewhere, right? Nobody starts a Twitter account and has 50,000 million followers, right? You have to start from somewhere. And sometimes all it takes is one book review or one interview that gets them to start building that following. And then all of a sudden they are an author that has a huge platform. So from my point of view, the purpose of my blog is to help them get there, not help the ones that are already there.
That's great to know. And Antonio said that those answers were really interesting. So thank you so much for answering his question. Since we're on this topic, one of the things I wanted to ask you guys is, have you ever turned down an author who wanted to be on your blog or show? And why would you do that? Even if you haven't, why would you?
I haven't. I actually, we have a booking manager, and she's also the producer of our program. And as long as they give us what we need for the show, she doesn't really turn anybody down. That's not saying she might someday, but right now, to this point, she has not turned anyone down. And we've had some pretty diverse authors on our show.
That's great. Ellen, I guess we can assume that if somebody came to you who was traditional, would you then say no?
Well, I wouldn't say no straight out. I would take a look at the bigger picture, but generally that is my rule. I prefer to work with small publishers and indie authors, mostly because they are the ones that need the help. People who are published by the big 5 publishers, they have a large marketing budget that they're working with. And I want to give that extra edge to those who may not have the funds to do that sort of traditional media. But specifically for my blog as well, I focus on 100% Canadian content. So I've had some American authors and some UK authors that have asked to be featured. And again, that's just one of my rules. I'm focused on promoting local content. So I won't feature anyone who is not Canadian, but I have a really loose definition of Canadian, as long as either the author or the publisher is Canadian, or if Canada features as a large role in their work, or if they're a permanent resident or recently became a citizen. Like, I have a really loose definition, but I do follow that pretty strictly.
Yeah, I've never turned anyone away, nor do I know why. And I don't think I would really have a reason to at this point. Maybe a repeat guest. I might turn certain guests away if they came back. No.
I've often thought about that as well.
No, it's probably not, though. Actually, I haven't had that many guests yet, but there's some that I'm like, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I would want to talk to that one again. It's on the bad days.
What about you, Katie?
I don't think I've turned down anybody. We welcome everybody, all kinds of people from the publishing industry. I think the only reason we would have an issue bringing somebody on is if there was a scheduling conflict. Mm-hmm. We're a 2-person team right now, so me and my co-host have a limited hour of recording time each week that we can use, and if we can't get somebody to fit in there, then unfortunately, we have to push them back until we can fit them in.
Yeah, that makes sense. What about you, David?
Hello?
Did you hear the question? Were you here for the question? Can you hear us, David? Okay. We will wait until David can hear us. But in the meantime, I've actually never turned I don't think I've ever turned anybody down for the Writer's Edge. Like I said, we're super diverse here, and the more diverse, the better. And, when people disagree on here, it's actually great because it's always very friendly and just saying your own opinions. And so for me, that's a huge plus. So I've never turned anybody down for this. I do try to pick people who I call them experts, in what I'm talking about and whatever the topic is. And what I mean by experts is some people will automatically assume it must be a traditionally published author. No, it's more somebody who has a lot of experience in whether it's a genre or whatever type of publishing, or like this, a lot of experience in media and, things related. So that's really what I'm looking for personally. So that's I'm not going to turn anybody down. So what would you say that you do like to talk about best on your blog or show? Like, do you have a format that you prefer? Do you prefer interviews? I know probably, Jim, you probably prefer interviews, but maybe you have other formats as well. For those of you who have blogs, guest topics, excerpts, what do you guys prefer?
Our format is that we don't have a format, and we'll talk. I mean, we go through, because we have sponsors as well. we have to go through about 5 minutes of sponsors and just, basic nebulous BS chat talk. And we bring our author in after a brief intro, and we pretty much let him set the tone of how he wants his time to go, because he's usually got historically around 40 minutes. That's all his time, which is unusual for a radio show and one person. So we let him kind of just define how he wants his hour to go. We do try to cut him off at a midway, only if he's wanting to stay on his book. We try to get into his process a little bit later. But for the most part, the format is we just let our authors choose the way they want the program to go.
Yeah, I usually start with a mini interview, a few quick questions, but then I just want to talk about what I want to talk about. So I have a general kind of subject, but the tangents abound on my show. I'm not the most strict about what I actually want to hear from my guests.
We're pretty much free form on our show as well. We do try, if we're lucky enough, to pair authors of similar genres or similar writing types. Or sometimes we'll contrast. We'll have a new author with an experienced author, so we can kind of get a round table going and try and get differences of opinion and compare and contrast different experiences.
My blog consists mostly of book reviews. That's how it started. That's its origin. But I really enjoy pairing author interviews with the review. So the readers get that sense of, okay, well, here's the book, and now here's the author answering questions about the book and their process and maybe their other books or whatever it may be. I've also recently been experimenting with short form guest posts, I guess. And these so far have been my writing tips posts, where I'll have 5 to 7 authors contribute a 1-paragraph tip on a certain topic. So I have writing short fiction, writing series fiction. I have one coming up that's going to be on writing fight scenes, things like that. I will likely branch out to full-length guest posts eventually, but I'm not quite there yet.
And David, if you can hear us now.
Yeah, I can hear you now. Sorry, I had internet problems yesterday, and it went on for all day, and we thought it was fixed, but now it appears that we're getting the gremlins again. But hopefully you can all hear me now. I wanted to just quickly ask. I wanted to quickly just answer the previous question about if I had to ever kind of deny anybody or block anybody in relation to the interviews. And I did have a couple of funny responses, because once I had someone that wanted me to interview them about their cookery book. And I thought, well, I can't go into the level of detail that I do on fiction books. So I decided to turn them down, because a lot of the time it's like, I love food, but I couldn't really, go down that particular route. Because I used to exclude non-fiction books as well, but I've become a bit more kind of open to maybe if they've got memoirs or comedy or narrative non-fiction is another thing that I'm happy to do. Someone actually wanted me to interview them regarding their curing their sexually transmitted diseases book. And I thought, well, I'm willing to do romance and erotica, but there's a line that I'm not willing to to cross on my platform. And that was pretty much the breaking point. So I just didn't even bother to respond. I would just like politely just let it just silently die. So that was another one that I had to deny. And also a poet who hadn't written any books. I've had to say to people, look, if you publish stuff online, if you've not been in the collection or you've not published at least one particular book, then I have to kind of draw a line as well, because there's lots of people that are publishing online that haven't really, moved from that point to actually publishing something, anthology or an actual book themselves. And that would greatly increase the number of people that I could talk to. And there's also people that are thinking about writing books but haven't quite got there. And my blog is all about the people that have finished a book, and they can tell us how they managed to finish the book, how they managed to finish what they started. And that's what the premise is. It's too full to write as I started, so I'll finish. So, it's all about people finishing their thing, so we can then go from there, because people could be talking about their book for months or years. And as much as I want to support them, I say, look, come back to me when you've actually written the book. So that was the answer to that particular question. In relation to my preferred format for what I like on my blog, I mean, it is primarily an interview haven for people, mostly for authors and for all the other people that I listed before, like photographers, musicians, the singer-songwriters, video game writers, anything that's to do with the things of writing. I've got a couple of script writers on there at the moment, and I'm getting another one in February. So really, my preferred format is author interviews, but I also publish a lot of poetry on there. And I'm willing to have anybody that wants to discuss creativity and how they create their particular medium, whether it be film, whether it be books, games, TV, or any particular medium. It's just that with authors, I've got an abundance of people that I'm chatting to, and it's a lot slower getting people interested in the other aspects. I think photographers are probably my second most, but I don't want to really kind of interview everybody under the sun, because there's just too many people out there. So I have to have some kind of criteria to talk to people about. But yeah, so ultimately, I mean, I tend to go through periods where I publish poetry for 30 days. Like if I do a National Poetry Writing Month in April, or in November there's National Blog Posting Month, so I will do that for a month. But then I pretty much go back to the format of just doing the author interviews, like several a week, or as many as, it depends how many people are actually interested in doing them. I'm going through a quiet period at the moment because a lot of people that I send questionnaires out to don't bother to come back to me. So I have to send out a lot to get a lot of good responses back. So that's the way that I deal with it. I just try to contact as many people as possible, and hopefully you'll get 2/3 of those responses back if you contact a lot of people.
Do you guys also find the same kind of thing, that you have to send out a bunch? Because I also do that for this show. I send out, of course, this panel was already set up gratefully by Creative Edge, but normally I reach out to a ton of people to see, of course I'm handpicking them, but I'm still reaching out to a bunch of them because, of course, everyone's schedules are going to be different. And I would say about what you said, David, 2/3 or maybe 50% sometimes, depending on the time of year too. If it's a heavy vacation month, it's going to be tough. So do you guys find that you have the same problem?
No, if anything, I have the opposite problem. I read the book before I will feature the author in any way, shape, or form on my blog. And I have more books than I could read myself. I'm at this point, because I go to a lot of writer events and things like that, and I'm always chatting with people, and they'll give me a copy of their book, or they'll send me the ebook or something. So right now I am actually backlogged for content for quite a while, because I have so much. I haven't actively had to reach out to anyone in quite a while now.
That's the same with our show. We have, we're actually booked through the year. And it's been that way since we've been on the air. And like you, Ellen, we also, all of our hosts, and there are 3 of us, or 4 of us actually, we read every book we talk to an author about. It's not fair to the author if you do not read the book.
Absolutely.
You can't speak intelligently about a book if you haven't read it. And we don't have producers that give us script sheets. We actually go in and read the book, and they're not all great, as I'm sure you have found out. I haven't read a bad book, but I haven't, I've read some really good ones too. Mm-hmm. So I agree with you wholeheartedly.
I guess I'll differ on this one, but that's partially because the premise of my show is different from talking about books, or even the focus as being on the author's craft. I tend to focus on just the interesting parts of the author's life as far as they relate to writing. And so also since as far as what I do outside the show, and I sometimes schedule huge blocks of recordings, I don't have time to read every book before I record, since my show's weekly. But I mean, I would like to. Most of these books are very intriguing to me, but when I end up hearing about them. But it also gives me something more I can ask questions about on the show if I don't know all the details of the story or the book.
I'm in the same boat. I don't have every book read from every author that we bring on. However, a lot of times in talking to the authors, I start adding more books to my to-be-read pile because their books sound so interesting.
Yeah, that's one of the great things about this. We discover so many authors we never knew about. And just like you said, the TBR list is huge now. It's even bigger than it was before.
I stopped counting my to-be-read pile.
Yeah, that's what Goodreads is for.
Mine's holding open my sliding glass door.
We do have a question in the chat, so I'm going to put that out there now. JD, thank you for the question. He's asking, what if someone was rude or someone is generally unpleasant, as in apparently so? I ask because I've seen on BookTube quite a few people who have blacklisted certain people because of lewd content. So what do you guys think? Would you not let somebody on again? Would you cancel in the middle if you're finding they're being rude or anything like that?
I can speak to this because I had an experience last year. I'm not going to name names or anything, but I no longer will feature this certain author on my blog or read their books because they acted in a really unprofessional manner towards me. Nothing lewd or anything like that, but just the way he went about certain interactions, I found really disrespectful. Not only to myself, but to others as well. So I made the decision to stop working with this person because it was no longer a mutually beneficial relationship.
Fortunately, we haven't had anybody that's been extremely rude on the show. But I would say 70% of our interviews that we do are via phone. And I have the disconnect button. So if one starts getting a little out of hand, you can give him a warning. And if he continues, bye. He's gone. And we can always come up with something to talk about in the studio. That's easy. Putting up with someone who is not a nice person, to put it bluntly, is not so easy.
Yeah, my show's pre-recorded, but during that recording process, if I was, and this has never actually happened, but if someone was actually being rude or nasty to me during the recording, I would not hesitate to hang up on them, and I can get more people. I like, it's kind of funny because I don't have a glut of people wanting to be on the show, but I've always got go-to people. I can replace a guest if they're not going to be meeting the standards of, discourse.
Yeah, we're the same way. We pre-record our shows, so if somebody is being rude, if somebody is not really participating like they should, then we don't have to put that show on the air.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, ours is live, as you know, Katie. So it's your options are a little limited. So,
but you do have the disconnect button. That's always handy.
I do have the disconnect button, although you will notice that I did not use it with you.
Oh, good. I'm so glad.
Well, and Jim, you've got people in the studio, but yeah,
I'm telling you, that's right. Katie writes the best books about vampires. If you like vampires, his books, they are wonderful.
You're gonna make me blush over here.
JD is actually asking, wow, Jim, has that happened a lot? Have you had to hit that disconnect button a lot of times?
No, never. I haven't used it yet.
Yay, that's great.
It is. I mean, most people are inherently nice, given the opportunity. Some people you wouldn't even want in your living room, much less on your radio show. So,
and most people, they appreciate what you're doing for them. They really interviewing them, sharing their books with the world. They appreciate that. And I don't think I've met a single person so far, knock on wood now that I say that has been rude. No.
We've had, like I said before, we've had New York Times best-selling authors on our show, and they have been just as nice as they could be. A good example is Craig Johnson, who came up with the Longmire character and is very... he had a big TV show and he's got many novels out there. It's just like talking to your brother. He's just a terrific guest and just easy to get along with, and that's the kind of people we like to have, but for the most part, that's what we do have.
Okay. So I want to ask you another question that has to do with the people that you decide to have on your shows or your blogs. And that is, would you say that you if you could, if you're going out there and picking, or, people are coming to you and you're trying to decide who you want to feature, would you say that you look for award winners or anything distinguishing about authors, or really that doesn't matter at all to you?
Doesn't matter
Writers.
to me at all. I want to see all aspects of the process.
Right.
Yeah. I agree.
It doesn't matter to me. Like I said, I work with a lot of indie, self-published, small press. A lot of those people aren't able to even apply for awards. So that doesn't really matter to me. I'm going to read their book. If I enjoy their book and they're decent enough, professional enough to communicate with, I'm going to feature them. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, it's once they're on the show, I mean, especially the new ones, the first time on the radio, those guys are great because they're so thankful. They get their books out there. They're nationally now on a national radio program, and they're absolutely just stunned at some of the comments that they get. So, and Katie's right. They're so thankful. They're just they love being on the show. And most of them are independently published. So, very few of the big five on our show.
One of the reasons I asked that is because I feel that a lot of indie authors feel a pressure to make themselves stand apart, or in order to be featured, to have best-selling or award-winning or something like that, because they think that it will open more doors. So it's really, really good to hear from you guys that actually it does not make a difference to you.
Mm-mm. And we tell writers all the time that, you go out and you write a book and you independently publish it. Don't expect money to be falling, into your lap, because that's not going to happen. Even getting on the radio, it's not going to happen. The only thing that's going to help your book is shameless self-promotion. And those 3 words are huge for an indie writer. If you're not out there promoting your book, no one is going to do it for you.
Well, I think that that leads to a lot of indie authors being more willing to come on shows. I don't know if you guys have experienced it at all, but when I send out requests for, people to see if they're available to come on a show, 90% of indies are ready, willing, and able. It's when I send requests out to other members of the publishing industry and sometimes traditionally published authors that they're not as flexible, not as available. Not to say they don't want to come on the show, but it seems a lot harder to get them.
I agree, Katie.
Well.
Definitely.
Definitely tougher to schedule them. I agree with that. I wanted to ask you a question that actually can take a number of forms. It doesn't just have to do with this topic, but I think it's kind of interesting. Some, or actually not some, many authors want to gear their books towards someone or something. And that can sometimes mean that they change their process. They change necessarily what they were going to originally write. Let's say they write a book and then they go back over it and say, you know what? I think that this particular genre or genre mix is selling better right now. I'm going to have to redo and make sure that it's what these different audiences are looking for. And so I wanted to ask you guys if you think that that's a good idea. Should writers be saying, I'm just going to publish, what I want to publish, and it doesn't really matter what's selling, or should they be gearing it to what's selling? Should they be listening to your programs and hearing your comments and trying to take that into account while they're writing? What advice would you give them on that front, in your opinion?
The right to market trend. Question. Oh, Jim, did you want to take that?
No. Go ahead, Katie.
Okay, I was going to say the right to market trend has actually been a topic we've been discussing in depth over the last month on our show. And it really depends on the author, what their goal is for the book. A lot of times authors want to be true to their craft. They want to be true to a story that speaks to them, and there is no problem with that. The money-making aspect side of it means that they're going to have to work harder on the promotion, whereas a lot of these right-to-market authors, they're making a killing out there because they're hitting a hot market and they're hitting it quickly. So they're sacrificing a little bit of passion for the genre. Which is fine too. It really depends on what the author wants to do, where their career is heading.
Well, yeah, and some of those right-to-market authors definitely have passion for their specific genre that they're writing in, which is what makes them able to write these books so quickly and effectively, I think.
And they put them out so fast too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's just like the old movies, the direct-to-video movies. You know, they get them out there and people watch them, but maybe they're not so hot. You know, but they're out there, and they're making money off of them. I think for an author, my opinion is that if you're going to write a book, and I'm not one to go write to sale on a book. I'm stumbling around right now. You know, only because the genre I write in is such a finite genre, which is Westerns, that I really. You can't go right to market with it. It has to, I mean, you have to think it out, and you have to craft a good story. And that's unfortunate for the genre that I write in, but I love the genre, so I'm not going to switch it. I don't know if that makes any sense. Maybe I'll just go to sleep now.
I think it totally depends on the author, and like I think it was Katie that said, it depends on what they want to do with the book. I feel like if they're writing to their passion and they're writing what they want to read, I believe that can make a stronger product because they feel it when they're writing it, and it's really what they want to be doing, as opposed to sometimes if you're writing to market, it can feel more like an assignment than something you really want to do. But at the end of the day, as long as the author is happy with it and they're putting out a good book that they're happy to promote, I see no problem either way.
Yeah, and I've been a ghostwriter, so I know what it's like to writing to feel like an assignment. But I wouldn't encourage anybody to. I wouldn't poo-poo the people who want to do that. You know, who want to write something that they know will be popular. Or they have good reason to be popular.
I think it's an interesting theory about writing for a market, because when I do the poetry writing month, I tend to use prompts, poetry prompts. So I'm technically writing, I guess that's more for inspiration rather than to a particular theme, because you can write about anything you want, but that they're there to trigger sort of something. So I tend to find that if you can have a very big broad theme that you can write to, then you can make your put your own individual uniqueness plug it into something, and yet still trying to appeal to a mass market. So that's one way to do it. But I think like other people have said, you shouldn't try to chase a particular genre or style if it doesn't suit you. Is that you should write what's true to your heart, and then try and find out which category or pocket it sort of sits in, or niche it sits in, and then try and market it that way. That's often what I'm doing, is trying to then identify the theme or the overarching kind of story theme after I've written the piece a lot of the time, because I will have put my emotional content in there, and then I can identify it that way. You know, you can sometimes you can do it the other way if you feel like writing a particular piece, and then you'll then let the piece develop that sort of way. But I tend to kind of reverse engineer a lot of things, where I will write the piece first, and then, as I say, then find out what tag it goes under, and then try and market it that way.
The problem with writing to market too is that you can notice a hot trend right now, but by the time you get around to writing it and finishing it and editing it and putting it out there, that trend can be over and you're missing the mark. So you may as well just write what you want to write.
A lot of these, the right to market people, the ones that are making the serious killing in it, they're putting books out as fast as every month. And I'm not sure how they're managing the quality side of it. I can't speak to the editing or the proofing or any of that, but they're putting them out so fast that they're hitting those Amazon algorithms so that their books are remaining on top of the charts and their visibility is staying up there. And that's what's helping to further along the next book they write and the next book they write and so on.
And that goes back to, what do you want out of your book? Do you want to spend the year and make it the best book you could possibly put out? Or do you want to put one out every month?
Well, that brings up the question
the same thing.
That brings up the question too. The indie marketplace has trained readers that they should be getting books faster, whereas the traditional marketplace, it's usually a year between books, especially in a series for most authors. And a lot of the readers out there that have gotten used to the indie style, or kind of like the, you know, the Netflix for books thing. They want to glut themselves on a series and have every book in that series available right then, right there.
Absolutely. I know some publishers will only sign on series if every book is already written. So they can put it out on that schedule instead of, okay, I'll accept book 1, we'll put it out, and then we'll work on book 2. Just like you said, that model doesn't work as well anymore. So especially the smaller publishers who rely on repeat readers, they have to take that into account and sign entire series.
Yeah, and there are certain, you know, high-profile authors, at least in fantasy, that I can think of who are that makes perfect sense that you'd want to have at least a good chunk of the series before you publish any of their books, because there's no guarantee they'll finish, say, book 3 in a timely fashion.
I mean, I don't mind quantity when it comes to quality if they are producing the quality, but if the quality is suffering, then they really should take more time, because it's just I would rather spend more time on something and miss a deadline, but then make sure it is pretty perfect and very well edited and proofread than just pump out something for the sake of it. I'm actually going to be releasing 2 poetry books pretty close together, but it's only because I had one I've tried to market elsewhere, and I'm going to self-publish it, and I'll have some more later in the year, but I don't try and rush the things that I do. It takes me a year to write an entire poetry book, because I have 2 kind of sessions that I then heavily kind of edit and put together, but I'm not going to rush my poetry. I mean, funnily enough, I do write some sort of like some poems, like 1 a day when I do the sessions. But when it comes to, I've got a short story collection. Those I made sure that those were sort of heavily edited and proofread, and I'm not about to rush anything else. If I do a novel, and I am working on a sci-fi novel, I'm not going to rush it for the sake of getting lots and lots of books out there. You know, I'd rather let it stand on the quality, and I'd rather have a lot less books out there and let people kind of anticipate and whet their appetite. Because if you give everything out there, then like you say, you're always chasing that tail. There's no way you're going to be able to keep up with the demand, because people will always burn through everything that you've got, and then they'll say, what more have you got? And unless you hold some stuff back, then that's the only way I can think it would work, is if you went and published a load of books but then didn't release them, and just then maybe you should work on books for like 10 years maybe and then just release 1 per year and just do it that way.
I'm kind of in that position right now.
Yeah.
I've got a trilogy that I'm writing that I will not release until that trilogy is done, and I'm only about halfway through the trilogy at this point. So if I make my self-imposed deadline, I'll have something new for readers, we'll say about summertime. If not, I'm really not under an official deadline, so I can push it back as long as needs to be done to make sure it's quality.
Let me ask you guys a question, because series books, when we're talking about writing in series, and maybe an author has 15 or 16 or 17 books in a series, and he's putting them out every 30, 60, 90 days. I would think, and I'm not a brilliant guy, but I would think that the format's there, and each chapter is formatted. So primarily, if you're going to do that fast of writing, it's like go in, change the name of the antagonist, change a little bit about the first chapter, move on to the second chapter. By the time you're done, with a few changes and maybe a location changes or so, you pretty much got the same book as you had 2 books before.
No,
it seems like, because when you read the series, like they have, there's John Sanford books, which incidentally he's on our show in April, from the Lucas Davenport series, and then you get James Patterson and those guys. It seems like the storyline is always pretty much the same. The action is pretty much the same. The way it happens and the format of which it goes is pretty much the same. The bad guy is different, maybe the location's a bit different. But it seems like if you're going to throw a book out that fast, you got to have something to back you up on it. And I don't think you can, from scratch, write a book every 60 days. I just don't think you can do it.
Oh, I mean, some people can, though. That's the thing. And they won't always be great books. Some people have done this. Some people are writing books in a continuing series. Because what you're describing sounds more like an episodic kind of series where,
right,
you don't have continuity so much from the previous books. It's not important exactly what happened in the last book. You could pick any of them up and they're all kind of the same. But there's some books which build on each previous book. Some series that each book builds on the last. And there's definitely one of those. It's 2 years old now, and there's 20 books in it that's independently published. And each book is 70,000 words long. These are not short books, and they're not long books, but they're not terribly short. And this is a huge series. I'm not going to argue for quality here. And that's why I'm not going to name the author's name. But this is these books aren't totally formula either. One of the problems with this approach, though, is I think it's more the editing and stuff like that you just don't have time for.
Well, that's also an issue, I would think.
No, I'm agreeing that it probably would be, yeah.
Speaking as an editor, get your books edited. If you're traditionally published, usually your publisher will provide an editor for you. But if you're self-publishing, get an editor. That's how you're going to get good reviews and make sales, honestly. Get a book cover designer and get an editor.
Yeah, 100% agree. And it's really important to have that editor, because unfortunately you do see a lot of reviews where it says, you know, this book needs editing, this book needs proofreading. And some people will dock you in the review, even if your book is excellent, just because of proofreading errors. What a shame to lose that 1 star just because of typos or grammar errors or whatever it may be. That's,
exactly.
You know, not worth it. Yeah.
An author doesn't need to be a grammarian. That's what an editor is for. That's what we're here for, to help you get your story from great to excellent. You have the story, just, you know, get someone to clean it up. It goes a long way.
I agree.
Agreed. Yeah.
So we're getting close to the end, but I do want to ask you guys one more question. And that is, especially since you are the way that a lot of indie authors get their voices out there, I would say to you, what is the best way for an author to get their book out there for readers to find, which of course it would be to find people like you who are going to accept them and help them out and feature them. But it is difficult to find sometimes where they should be putting their book. Should they be sending media packets just all over the place? Do you guys think that it should be pretty targeted depending on like genre? I think a lot of you actually deal with any genre. So do you have any advice as to how they should go about that in a more sort of like strategic way, I guess?
My vote would be for targeted. Speaking from my blog perspective, I deal with speculative fiction only, which I define as science fiction, fantasy, crime, mystery, and horror, because that's what I like to read. And that's what I'm staying up to date on. So I'm going to be able to give better reviews and better feedback because those are the genres I'm comfortable with. Someone has come to me with a romance novel and I said, sorry, like I can recommend these other reviewers, but I personally am not going to read and review your book because my review won't mean anything, honestly, in the scheme of things, because I don't deal with romance. So I would vote for targeted. Google, if you're a Western writer, Google for review blogs or review shows that cover Westerns and go to them, email them.
I'm kind of a fan of the scattershot approach, though, because like you just said, if somebody approaches you and maybe they don't have the genre you review, you might have a suggestion for someplace for them to go as well.
That is
not
true.
Not that they shouldn't be targeting, but, you know, always be open to any opportunity.
Well, we tell writers all the time that the best way to get their book out there is get yourself on the media as much as you possibly can. And don't forget that there are book fairs and libraries you can go present your material at. There's all kinds of things happening all the time. And if you're not taking advantage of them, then you're not trying hard enough.
And just talk to people, honestly. Like he just said, there are writers' festivals and conferences that you can go to. As a reviewer and an editor, I go to writers' festivals to meet new clients, new people to interview, new books to read. So, but I'm not walking around with a sign on my chest that says, hey, I review books. So go to these events, but talk to people. and find out what they're doing and what advice they can give you, or find out if they'll interview you on their blog. Like, you don't know what kind of platform someone has until you talk to them.
Absolutely.
Good
Yeah,
point.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Great advice from all of you. So we are just about out of time. Actually, we are out of time officially. So first of all, thank you so much to the panelists who were here. This was an awesome discussion. We hit on some amazing topics that are going to help everyone out there. I know there are some super hot topics in there that everyone wants to know more about, especially from the people who are doing the interviews and the reviewing. It's really important to know your opinions and your ideas. So also thank you so much to Mickey and Creative Edge, and Mickey also said that he would like to specifically thank all of the panelists and everyone who came. So let's stay tuned, guys, because everyone here is going to tell you where to find them, and then you'll find out what the next episode of The Writer's Edge is too. So let's go in. I hope I get the same order, but let's start with Katie. Where can everybody find you?
Okay, the easiest way to find Spilling Ink is to look for us on our Facebook page. We've got our request sheet right at the top of our page. So if you're wanting to be interviewed by us, fill out the form and we'll be in contact with you. Also, you can find me at katiesalidas.com, or I live on Facebook too.
Great. Thank you so much for being here, Katie.
Thank you.
And what about you, Jim?
So my website.
I can.
Oops.
Misheard.
Tim, sorry.
Who was actually
Either way.
called on there?
Tim, how about you, Tim?
Okay, sorry. My website is mentalcellarpublications.com. That's cellar with a C, like a basement. And you can email me if you want to be on my show at podcast@mentalcellarpublications.com. That's a mouthful, sorry.
Thanks, Tim. And now onto the rhyming name, Jim.
Okay. Actually, you can find my my publishing company at blackdogpublishing.co. It's also, you can find us on Facebook at Facebook.com/Writers Block Radio Show. And if you want to get on our show, the email address is guestwb@yahoo.com. And you can find us just about anywhere around there.
Okay, and what about you, Ellen?
My blog can be found at sqsreviews.com. All my social media and email links are all on the webpage. And I will note that this summer I am expanding the blog and actually launching some brand new aspects of it as well. So all the updates on that will be posted on the blog.
Great, thank you. And finally, David.
Hopefully it's not going to cut out again. I'm just so sorry about tonight, this stupid internet connection. Yeah, so my platform is Too Full to Write. So that's www.toofulltowrite.com, toofulltowrite.com. I'm also on Facebook, and it's at Creativity Resources. So it's www.facebook.com/creativity resources. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Too Full to Write as my username. There's a contact me form on my website at twofulltowrite.com, where you can submit what you want to collaborate with me for, whether it's a poetic duet, whether it's an author interview, or whether it's something else like a guest post or something else. You can contact me there.
Great, thank you. And now you guys who are watching this, whether you're watching it now or afterwards, you have a lot of people to contact. So I hope this helps. And my name is Christy Stratus. You can find me at christystratus.com. I'm also at thewritersedgeshow.com. And if you go to The Writer's Edge Show, you can contact us and be on our show. If you aren't available for a show, you can also do a blog post. I am also on YouTube over at youtube.com/ChristyStratus. And I am on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and I also, like Ellen, have an editing company named Proof Positive. That is proofpositivepro.com. And of course, I have to say thanks again so much to Creative Edge for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to check them out in the description box below. And if you have any questions at all, their contact info is right down there. And don't be shy, email them. They are super friendly and quick to respond. And don't forget to tune in next week for The Writer's Edge. That is, or not next week, next month. I'm getting very excited about next month. It's going to be February 15th, and that is right the day after Valentine's Day. So we we're going to be doing the topic of variety in romance writing. So as always, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope to see you guys next month. Bye.